All right, Colts Nation, here's a question right here. Where are you guys at right now on Jelani Woods? Remember the tight end, Jelani Woods, that we were all super, super excited about before last season, where we saw him play 0 snaps? Me and you played as many snaps as Jelani Woods for the Indianapolis Colts last year. I feel like right now he's the type of player, at least from what I see online or what I might feel, right? Tell me if my finger's on the pulse right here. I feel like some of you have either entirely disregarded Jelani Woods. That's one group of people. And then there's the other group of people that still hold him in super high esteem and are still really high on him. There's no one that's like neutral on Jelani. You've either forgotten about him or you're super high on him. And he is kind of a fascinating case as a player, if you ask me. And yes, by the way, we'll get to the schedule. I know all of you guys are dying to hear me talk about games that are being played in September, right? There's nothing interesting at all about a schedule release. You know what I'm saying? Like, other than the fact that you can now pick and choose which games you're going to go to, like logistically, you could start to plan some stuff. I mean, where's really the fun in talking about games, right? We haven't gone through training. We don't know anything about what the hell is going to go on over there. I'll still talk about it, but I find this more interesting. Either way, back to the topic at hand. Jelani Woods, his rookie year, if we're to be honest, he had 15 to 20 catches. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Very few catches. I feel like I remember every single one. I mean, Jelani Woods was so exceptional to the eye when I was watching him as a rookie. I mean, he would just pop off the field. Like, he was one of the, I thought sometimes he was about to just come out of my TV screen into my living room. He was really popping off the screen like that. Now, the upside for Jelani Woods, all of that being said, obviously was clear as a rookie, but to what degree does the sample size matter? Because for me personally, if we're going to be honest, if we're calling a spade, the hamstring issues are a bit concerning at his size. Hamstrings are the type of injury, right? As you get bigger, it does not get easier to take care of that, right? Your legs are taking on a pretty big burden by carrying around such a big guy. And Jelani Woods is an exceptional athlete, particularly when compared to moi, right? And I'm not going to sit here and call him overweight, but perhaps he could have afforded to take off just a few pounds, right? And hamstrings can linger and they can be chronic. Like, they're the type of injury that I see on a guy his size, and it doesn't exactly have me super optimistic about his ability to stay healthy. Now, if we're to be completely fair to Jelani Woods, I don't know anything about his current health status per se. All I'm saying is that he has to prove his ability to stay healthy, not just to me, but to this coaching staff as well. Because don't forget, Jelani Woods was drafted during the Frank Reich era. So anything that we as fans have seen that we like out of Jelani Woods, the current coaching staff has not seen up close and personal. They have no allegiance to Jelani Woods. They went and drafted Will Mallory last year and, had how many tight ends going into the season? Like 7, right? But also, you do look at the current tight end room for the Indianapolis Colts, and you say, all right, you toss Jelani Woods in a room of Kylan Granson, Mo Ali Cox, Will Mallory, and probably a couple guys I'm forgetting on that front. Is Pharaoh Brown still on the team? I know I'm supposed to be the guy that has that information for you. I'm sorry, I couldn't keep up with it. Point being is, you look at the tight ends we have and you say, okay, from an upside perspective, Jelani has to have the most upside of all of the tight ends on the team, right? But upside in of itself won't necessarily equal big-time production, but also, what exactly is a reasonable expectation for what Jelani Woods brings to the table this year for the Indianapolis Colts? Like, when you think of big-time production for Jelani Woods, what exactly does that mean if we were to say something like that? Because as I've said, this Colts offense is absolutely loaded with talent and weapons, right? And we want to run the football, and there's only one football to go around to everybody, right? So you're talking about Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor getting their carries in this offense. And even assuming Jelani Woods' health, you look around at the weapons that we can throw to and say, okay, how many times can he possibly get targeted with what we have in place? And when we do, how often can we expect him, one, to be the guy on the field, and two, be the guy getting targeted, right? Like you'd imagine that the wide receivers on this football team with the talent that we have there are going to account for most of the production in the passing game. Now, I might be wrong, but Michael Pittman Jr., we know who he is. Now, there's a little, bugaboo. There's a debate amongst the fan base as to whether or not he's a wide receiver one, whatever. We can leave that on the side. Michael Pittman Jr., in the grand scheme of things, is one of the better receivers in the NFL. Top 15, top 20 cannot be debated. In my personal opinion, Josh Downs, everyone talking about A.D. Mitchell right now, as they should, but Josh Downs was the guy last year, and he was a third-round pick, and we thought he could have been a second-round pick. I thought he should have been the second-round pick at 35 last year, right? Before we went and traded back and ended up with Juju Brents. Was it 35? I forget exactly what our second-round pick is. Point being is we traded back, we got Juju Brents, and then we got Downs in the third. I would have liked Downs at the pick that we traded back at, right? Like, I would have liked Downs right then and there. Point being is he was the guy last year, and now all of a sudden, he's not being talked about because we brought in A.D. Mitchell, who, by the way, if there's ever, right, like there are things that I think I know, and there's things I'm relatively confident in. I can guarantee I would put in a substantial amount of money on if we could just place bets on subjective terminology. A.D. Mitchell is the real fucking deal, right? And I only bring that up to say this wide receiver group collectively, and I know we're talking about Jelani Woods, but to build them up is to point to what I'm saying about Jelani Woods. What do we expect, right? The wide receiver group collectively that we have right now, in my personal opinion, has as much upside as any I've seen as a Colts fan. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, well, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, that duo, what are you even talking about, Justin? All right, fine. I'm not going to say that anyone we have here is better than either of those guys. That's not my point. But at the same time, when you think about those times for the Indianapolis Colts, who the hell was in the slot, right? Listen, okay, Austin Collie, Blair White, Anthony Gonzalez, right? Just some of the names. Am I forgetting anyone that was particularly impactful for the Indianapolis Colts in the slot in the 2000s, right? None of those guys were Josh Downs. So you look at the group of three, and all I'm saying is that it's fun to kind of be in awe of the possibilities of what this receiving core can bring. Either way, back to the point, which is Jelani Woods, I'm just curious what you guys would consider a successful season for him. And do you expect him to move the needle for this offense at all? Or is he just going to be a forgotten weapon? Like, in fairness, like watching Anthony Richardson, one of the throws that he does really well, and I'm curious if any of you guys have noticed this, right? He does a really good job at these, and I think it's because of his size and his arm strength. The combination of those two things make him uniquely qualified for some of these seam routes over the middle, which is tight end central. Some of those great, you think back to Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, they were just working that seam all day. Anthony Richardson has the type of arm and size to make that throw, and I thought we saw him make that throw often last year at a high level. So Jelani Woods fits right into that. So maybe the tight ends get a little bit more production than I think, but is that kind of a carousel of guys? Is that a committee of tight ends? A lot of times we think committee in football and we go to the running back position, but do we have a committee at tight end, or can Jelani Woods separate himself? That's kind of the question. I just thought we would talk about him because last year he was a big topic during the offseason. And this offseason, maybe he is a little bit, but at the same time, things move very, very fast in this league. It's a perfect example of why that is. Now, on to the schedule. Well, actually, before we get into the schedule, what am I doing? I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, I ask anyone enjoying it on YouTube, go ahead, shoot it a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Audio listeners, 5 stars or turn it off, right? We don't need 1 stars. We don't need 3 stars. I'm not trying to take constructive criticism over here. That's not what I'm in the business of. I'm in the business of being a 5-star podcast product for the Indianapolis Colts. And if you don't think I'm that, get the heck out of here. We're trying to get to 2,500 subscribers on YouTube. Really, we'd like to be at 3,000 by the season. But let's start with 2,500. If you keep coming back, enjoying the content, then perhaps today's the day. But if not, I do hope you enjoy it. Pop around in the comments, be civil with one another, and be civil with me, please. I mean, my goodness, right? Let's not shoot the messenger. I'm just out here trying to tell you the truth. But either way, on to the schedule. Now, the reason I waited to why I even thought we should talk about Jelani Woods is, what am I supposed to say about the schedule that is at all insightful, right? Like even Coltstradamus, which by the way, that's what they call me, Coltstradamus, because I could predict the future when it comes to these Indianapolis Colts. If you didn't know that, I can't give you any insights about games being played 5 to 6 months from now. Like, I just can't do that, right? It's almost absurd to even talk about the particulars of these games, if you ask me. Now, with this said, I can try to give you a range based off of the schedule I'm looking at. And right now I'm looking and saying, well, okay, I would expect at least 9 wins out of this football team with the schedule we have in front of us, with upside of 12, Lord forbid, maybe 13 if everything goes our way. But really, 12 I would view as the most reasonable upside for this team. Now, if we're to be fair, I do essentially view the entire division in that same light. Maybe not quite the Titans, but I could see the Titans right in that 8 to 10 range. But when you talk about the Colts, the Jaguars, and the Texans, as to who's going to end up with 9 wins, who's going to end up with 12, for me, it's a complete toss-up. I know a lot of you guys are going to say the Texans because they had the most spectacular offseason, at least on paper, of everyone in the division. But last year, it was all about the Jaguars, right? And we saw how they pooped the bed, those disgusting, despicable Jaguars fans who thought they were in the middle of a dynasty. Meanwhile, they just went 9-8 back to back and are now, for all you know, third place in this division. Nothing gives me more joy than the misery of a Jaguars fan. I almost like the misery of Jaguars fans even more than the accomplishments of the Indianapolis Colts, if I'm to be 100% honest with you. But besides the point, right? It's just tough to know in this division who's who, right? And at the end of the day, 8 of the 17 games that you play are going to be in the division. Like when we had 16 games, remember all those years ago when there was 16 games? It was 50% of your games were in the division. Even if it's not an exact 50% now, at the end of the day, that's what makes the difference in the season. All the other games, great, but your division, how you do in there, is ultimately going to determine how far you go in this league. So these are the things that I feel make this division particularly interesting, just from the perspective that it is hard to predict. Now, as far as the schedule itself goes, and my thoughts there, I do have a few observations, at least off an initial look, right off the bat. Number one, week 1 Texans. We haven't won. I'm losing track of the streak. It's one of these things. What have we not won a week 1 game since 1922? I mean, it has been a long time, right? It has been since what, 2013? I'm losing track. Even a few years back, right? Remember, there was the 2 streaks that went head to head in week 1 in the Matt Ryan season, whereas the Colts hadn't won a week 1 game in however long, but the Texans also hadn't beaten us in however long. And it was these 2 streaks colliding, and instead of one of them breaking, we tied. I mean, they were both that strong. So either way, though, week 1 against the Texans is absolute fireworks. How can you not be excited about that? You're just waiting for the Colts one of these days to come out with that week 1 W. And right now feels like the best position we've ever been in, albeit particularly early and far ahead. It's just things feel good for me right now for the Indianapolis Colts. I am very excited, obviously, for week 1. I think the week 2 game against the Packers is incredibly interesting. Very cool game to me and a great test to see where we are. The Packers ended up being one of the hottest teams in football last year towards the end of the season. They started off very slow. The Colts and the Packers were the 2 youngest teams. The Colts were the 2nd youngest team in football. I always refer to that. The Packers were the 1st. And based off of their off seasons, I haven't checked exactly, but I'd imagine they both are still 2 of the 3 youngest teams in football. So I think to see the Colts come out and play these Packers, who ended up, again, at the end of last season, being one of the better teams in football, that's going to be a great test for us. Fun fact, by the way, back in the year 2020, I wanted the Colts to draft Jordan Love as Phillip Rivers' successor. That being said, we had traded our first-round pick for DeForest Buckner, but no one really expected Jordan Love to be a first-round pick. The Packers traded up for him. Jordan Love is someone I've always liked, and once upon a time, I thought he might be a Colt, but that was to no avail, and it's all right because we have our guy now. Neither here nor there. I like his upside more than Jordan Love anyway. That's a fun game. Week 3. I'm not going to go every game, I promise you, all right? But these are the ones I find interesting. Caleb Williams and the boys and what Chicago's building up. That's another great litmus test. We're a very young team. The Bears kind of in a rebuild. That being said, the Bears kind of have some win-now weapons around Caleb Williams, but it's going to kind of be cool to see how Anthony Richardson shows up against some of these young up-and-coming quarterbacks, right? The first 3 weeks for me, very, very exciting on this schedule. And realistically, throughout the season, we're versing a lot of young teams and young quarterbacks, at least off the initial look. Now, I can't tell if that's just because most teams are led by young quarterbacks. Like, I'd have to actually sit down and think about that. And you don't want to just watch me, like, just like look in the sky and try to think through the teams. But either way, my point is that there's really nothing all that daunting about the schedule that we have in front of us, in my opinion. Now, of course, things change all the time. This league is very, very unpredictable, and the margin of error is not like college football where you have like 113 teams or 112 teams in Division 1. any one of the teams in the NFL could beat the other team. That's the beauty of it, right? That's why they got to go out and play on Sunday. That's why the Super Bowl isn't won in the offseason. And that's why we don't know anything about what the Texans are going to do, right? That's the beauty of this league. But the schedule on its surface, to me, looks like one that can be a playoff schedule. We're going to see what that ends up looking like eventually. Let's get the training camp first, and let's get through the offseason. We don't even know if we have new signings coming in, although I would not get your hopes up. We would expect somebody to be signed in the secondary, at least as a safety, right? You'd have to think. Either way, that's not really the point. That's not the schedule. Last note about the schedule, week 14 bye. Curious what we think there. That can go multiple different ways, right? Because if we hit a slump mid-season, you really like to have that bye week drop in there to give you just a second to regroup and try to figure things out. But at the same time, if you hit a hot streak, you don't want a bye week to disrupt everything. So I don't really have a strong opinion as to whether or not a week 14 bye is a good or bad thing, but that is particularly late in the season. And, we'll just see how that goes. Curious to hear if you have like a hard and fast, it's either good or bad that we have a week 14 bye. But either way, the way I'm looking at it is if by week 14, I guess if by week 4, it's not my wording. We'll know very well where we stand before that bye week. And then you get that bye week and you get to go end the season strong against, well, again, what seemingly would be a relatively easy schedule. Last month of the season, Broncos, Titans, Giants, and then Jaguars in week 18, which in fairness why do they continue to do that to us, right? It is, just one of those things that's hard to be very excited about on its surface. But hey, it is what it is. That's the episode for today. That's Jelani Woods. That's the schedule. And until next time, my name is Justin. This right here was the Riding the Bench Colts podcast, and actually is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. It's always going to be that. Well, maybe not always, but certainly for the foreseeable future. If you haven't liked, subscribed, whatever the hell it is that I asked you to do at the start of the show, you haven't done any of that stuff yet, maybe now's the time. But as always, go Colts.